Daniel Ricciardo has likely said goodbye to his racing career as the Aussie wasn't able to quite fulfill the dream that he originally planned in his mind to replace Perez and retire as a Red Bull driver. After the latest development of events regarding the future of the 8-time race winner, it became more than obvious that Red Bull are going to look in and out of their pool of drivers to replace Ricciardo, with Horner hinting about a shocking move that could happen from 2026 onwards. Was Singapore the last race ever in Ricciardo's F1 career? And if so, which route will Red Bull take from now on? Ever since the Singapore GP started to build up, one of the primary talking points was about Ricciardo being replaced by Liam Lawson for the remainder of the season. And these talks weren't something made up. Helmut Marko himself said that after Singapore, we will have a clear picture as to what happens with their choice of drivers. The fact that Ricciardo dropped out of Q1 and was nowhere near competing for points, while Tsunoda made it to Q3 in Singapore, didn't help his case either, as it's now obvious that a replacement is well on its way. In one of the latest interviews about Daniel Ricciardo, Horner revealed that the Aussie didn't really fulfill the goals that Red Bull had set for him, which would have made Ricciardo a legitimate contender for the seat next to Verstappen from 2025 onwards. Elaborating on this, Horner said, "Daniel was our banker if Sergio was to drop the ball. Daniel has had a reasonable season, but it hasn't been a stellar year. The question is, how good is Liam? And sometimes difficult decisions have to be made in order to get those answers." Obviously, the value that Ricciardo brought to the team was more in experience and marketing compared to the points scored on the table, even though he's not that far away compared to Tsunoda, having scored 12 points, 10 less than the Japanese driver. Nevertheless, this wasn't the reason why Red Bull opted to replace De Vries after just 10 races in 2023 with Ricciardo. And now that the Austrian squad will pay a lot more attention to fixing the RB20 for the remainder of the 6 races compared to the drivers lineup for Racing Bulls, it's safe to say that Lawson will have some big shoes to fill. We've seen it last year that the Kiwi driver can perform when it matters the most, having scored 2 points in Singapore, a racetrack he visited for the first time in his racing career, while 2 of the 5 duels with Tsunoda were ended prematurely because of the Japanese driver not starting and not finishing these races. Lawson has shown clear maturity in a car that was definitely one of the worst on the grid, and this is why Helmut Marko, the man responsible for Red Bull picking up young drivers and bringing them to the top level of racing, has a very high opinion of Liam and his future in the Red Bull nest. There were rumours that Liam might look for a place elsewhere because it was quite obvious that the Austrian team were playing the hot and cold game with him for quite a long time, but after how everything unfolded with Ricciardo, who might have done the last heroic thing for his buddy Verstappen and took the extra point for the fastest lap in Singapore from Lando, now there is no doubt that Racing Bulls are ready to move in a new direction. This was hinted before by the shareholders of the team, who were voiced through Helmut Marko, as the veteran Austrian insisted that the Faenza-based squad is a team that should be made out of young drivers, not ones that are closer to retirement than they are to the beginning of their career. Although Red Bull would have a huge tribute to pay to Ricciardo if in the remainder of the 7 races and 3 sprint circuits the order is exactly the same as it was in Singapore, because his fastest lap at Marina Bay circuit guaranteed that even if Norris wins all of the races until the remainder of the season, with Verstappen finishing second, he will be without the title at the end of the year. But Christian Horner has also admitted that there is something that he needs to pay a lot of attention to, and that is the talent outside of the Red Bull's pool of drivers. For example, Russell is out of contract from 2026 onwards, and when talking live on Sky F1, the Brit said that it would be very strange and stupid if his team doesn't consider bringing the Brit to Red Bull if they have the opportunity. Elaborating further on Ricciardo's situation, Horner said, "I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of driver contracts. There is privacy between the company and individuals. Liam, the job he did for us last year in the V-Carb car was very impressive. Max is delivering. Checo has been under-delivering this year. Last year he did a good job, or good enough to finish second in the championship and be the Constructors' champion." We're having to look further down the road. We've got Liam Lawson on the bench. We're not quite sure. Looking at the likes of Colapinto, Behrman and Antonelli, is he at that level? Only time will tell, but we are not afraid to go out of the pool. George Russell is out of contract at the end of next year. It would be foolish not to take that into consideration. And these options were shared from pundits that are quite remarkable in the Formula One world, such as Martin Brundle, who said that Liam Lawson will drive for Red Bull from Austin onwards. But that doesn't mean that we're not going to see Ricciardo in the pool of drivers that Red Bull has. Quite the contrary, with how Perez has dropped the ball despite the encouraging words from Christian Horner after Singapore, his seat is never safe, as he is the only driver from the top 8 to have not won a race in 2024, despite having quite a dominant car up until Miami, when McLaren brought a very competitive package to the MCL 38. What is definitely certain is that Ricciardo doesn't have anything to regret, and Verstappen was adamant that even if Singapore was the last race of his former teammate, one with which they went to great extremes before the 8-time race winner left for Renault, the Dutchman stated that many would dream to have a career like the one of Ricciardo. Elaborating on this, the 3-time world champion said, "Daniel is a great guy. I think he has proven himself as a great F1 driver. He is a friend of mine, and I think in general, always being in this kind of position is never nice. Even if Singapore is the last race or whatever, he can still look back at something amazing that not many people can achieve and do something else in life. There are many other race series or not, maybe just chill back at the farm and have a lot of fun." The same narrative was shared by Yuki Tsunoda, the man who actually made it quite hard on Ricciardo to prove that he has what it takes to be Red Bull's next driver, as the Japanese young gun had nothing but praise for the amount of experience and knowledge that Ricciardo brought to Racing Bulls, ultimately pushing them to score the results that they did. Of course, the projections for Racing Bulls were much higher at the beginning of the season, but once the car had shown its true potential in pre-season testing as well as the first couple of races, Ricciardo's input helped Tsunoda a lot in receiving a car that would be much easier to drive. And elaborating on the relationship that he had with Ricciardo, Tsunoda said, "I definitely respect him a lot. The things he has are things I don't have, especially like emotional control and how he is able to be consistent with the team. I am probably more emotional if I have a bad session or whatever. For example, the quality of feedback might be a little bit worse than usual. He is very consistent, and I think he understood more about the car. He understood more about probably the situations that the car found itself in. I learned a lot of things from him, and I am still learning from that." All of this will make it very hard on the Racing Bulls when it comes to finding proper ground with Liam Lawson and potentially grooming him for a Red Bull seat, because as all things stand, Verstappen is all but certain from 2026 onwards, and that means that if the team would promote, it would certainly be from within. With all this in mind, do you think that Racing Bulls made the right choice to replace Ricciardo with Liam Lawson? Let us know in the comments below, and once you do that, make sure to check out the video that's appearing on your screen right now.